Welcome to the Primo's Musings podcast.
Hey, good evening, Dan. How are you doing?
Good evening. I'm doing great. How are you?
All right. I think this was one of those March Madness where Cinderella definitely did not have its run. And your thoughts on the first two rounds before we jump into the Sweet 16 matchups?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, you kind of as you just alluded to, Cinderella did not have its run. We had a few near Cinderella stories in the first round. Couple good upsets, namely, I think you've discussed them in your recaps, obviously. But the two big ones, I think, are Yale, obviously the Ivy League, the smart kids school, as they've been calling them, defeating a powerhouse from the SEC in Auburn. And then the Oakland, who people thought Oakland was from California. They didn't even realize Oakland is a school in Michigan, defeating the blue blood Kentucky. So a couple of first round knockouts, but then the second round, I think I believe there was only, if I have, let me check this. Yeah, so in the second round of the 16 games, only one lower seed was victorious, if you could believe that. I think just Clemson over Baylor. Everything else was true to chalk in the second round. Or maybe I'm sorry, maybe Gonzaga, Kansas. I think that was a 5-4. But that was the only real upset there. Clemson over Baylor, and then NC State, obviously with an 11 seed advancing, but they played Oakland in the second round, who was a 14 seed. So NC State's really the only shocker in the round of 16, but the way they've been playing, as we'll talk about, I guess it's not that much of a shocker.
Yep. So I think that's good, right? I mean, I think typically Peters or Loyola, which makes a deep run, or I think I talked about in my podcast about George Mason many years ago, but
right
here we are, right? I mean, I think one thing before I get started with the matchups, for the first time in many years, I think you have both the 1 and 2 seeds in the Sweet 16, 2 3 seeds, 2 4 seeds, 1 6 seed, and 1 11 seed. Even the 11 seed is from a powerhouse conference, ACC, which is seems to be right now on paper or on the tournament. It's the best conference in terms of wins and losses. So let's get down to that. I mean, let's get down to the first ACC team that's going to be tipping off with Arizona. And right now, when I talk about it, I think Arizona is the better favorite team. So what do you think, happens in this, and why do you think that Clemson has a chance to upset Arizona?
Yeah, so I think I gotta like Arizona in this game. I think they're gonna represent. They probably want to go out on a good note for the Pac-10. Maybe they're playing with a little bit of that. Arizona is obviously moving on to the Big 12 next year, and the Pac-10 or Pac-12, we can call it as we know it, is dissolving. So I think that'd be a good story if Arizona. I see Arizona beating Clemson. Arizona's got as much talent as anyone. They have a lot of experience on the team, and as you talked about, I think in your podcast today, you were talking about how a lot of these college teams are, they're getting older. The average age might be a little older because some players, they realize they can stay behind an extra year or two now, maybe, and they can collect that NIL money. And as opposed to maybe, entering the draft and they don't get drafted, or they go play in the G League and they don't, they can make almost the same money in college, they figure. So Arizona is an experienced team, a lot of veterans on this team. They have the transfer Caleb Love from North Carolina. He's a senior, I believe.
Right.
They got a big man, blanking on the last name right now.
Omar Ballo, I think.
Ballo, yes, Ballo, yes, Omar Ballo. Thank you. So they got him, and Clemson. I haven't really seen too much this year. I mean, they're experienced in a tough conference. They played Duke a couple times this year, Carolina, NC State. They've run the gamut, tough conference. So they beat a great Baylor team in the last round. So they're obviously a solid team. But I think Arizona's just gonna have a little too much in this one.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you. I think Caleb Love, who takes like 7 to 8 threes a game and shoots about 35% from the arc, which is not great when you compare some of the players who shoot like 40 to 45%. But I think to me, some of the things which are very troubling to me was that even though Clemson is in the Sweet 16, they did lose to Boston College, which is not a great college basketball team in the ACC tournament. The Clemson did start like 9-0 when the season started, but like you said, right? I mean, Arizona, they're on the West Coast. You don't see much of them, but just having watched some of the games during the tournament, I really feel that with Caleb Love and Omar Balo, who
Yeah.
averages like 12 and 10, from points and rebounds, I think they have a better chance. I mean, Clemson has its own guy, which is like PJ Hall, who scores, who's like 18 points a game. But it should be a good one. But I think when you talk about the upset, I call it like the upset meter. I call it like very low to moderate. I think that's where I see it. So I think both of us agree there. All right, the next one on Thursday, tip off 7:40. It's my alma mater, UConn and San Diego State. Both these teams faced off in the national championship last year. So how do you think it goes? I know where I'm going, but and I'm pretty sure where you're going. But
Oh yeah.
let's hear your analysis here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, like, base 95% of all, I think, bracket predictors this year are going with UConn all the way. I don't know what the actual number is, but based on our pools and all the pools that I've entered this year, it's just overwhelmingly everyone's having love for UConn this year, and rightfully so. As all the analysts have said on TV, they literally have no weaknesses. They can win when they go fast. They can win. They can slow it down and win at that game with using Klingon as the big man and run the offense through him with like a motion offense. And they can beat you in the half court defense and beat you running up and down the court. So they've got every tool necessary. They've got 3 or 4 guys that can hit the three with a high percentage, with Caravan and Newton and Spencer, and then a few of the young guys off the bench you mentioned. I think it was a Jalen Stewart.
Jalen Stewart and Stephen Castles. Castle is probably
Yeah,
more of a bigger scorer than Jalen Stewart. I mean, Jalen Stewart
yeah,
has come through big in the Big East Championship, but yeah, I mean, they have all the weapons like you talked about, but I think
yeah,
we're both
yeah.
leaning that way. I think, yeah.
Yeah, and just too much power. I mean, maybe San Diego State will hang in there for a little bit. I mean, UConn so far has just destroyed both teams. I mean, the first round game, obviously Stetson, but then Northwestern, who's a solid Big Ten conference team. They had a few injuries. I know a few big men that were out, but UConn just looked like a high school team when they were playing against that Northwestern. They just ran all over them and just abused them with the pick and rolls, motion offense. Really, just really beat them up pretty good. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think UConn double-digit victory. I think what they've won hasn't UConn won like by 15 or more in the tournament now for 8 straight games, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, including last year's
Yeah,
6 in a row. So
correct.
you're right. I mean, I think I think as my alma mater, I'm always very skeptical of how I pick, and I know, as you know, like when you have your alma mater, you're always skeptical of each and every game, even though you think it's a runaway game. But like I said, UConn's probably definitely has more firepower. The one thing that San Diego State does have, Jaden Delady, who's a very solid player, but I think San Diego State also, a lot of turnover on both sides. But San Diego State has probably lost more in terms of, they used to be very good on defense. And that's one of the reasons why they got to the finals last year. So I think we both pick UConn there. So the next one, again, we're definitely going chalk here. And the next one is Thursday. It's again 7:09 p.m. North Carolina and Alabama. Again, you would think this is like more like a football, but like in this
Yeah.
sphere we are. And you know, go ahead and think what you think would be your on this matchup here.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go chalk on this one too. I mean, I think Carolina, once again, a very experienced team, lots of upperclassmen. They got RJ Davis at the point guard, right? Who's been
Hmm.
I think he's either a fourth or fifth year at this point. One of the better point guards in the
Probably
country.
the oldest team in the NCAA right now, 22 years old.
That's right. I saw that stat you said, 22, just like I think the Oklahoma City Thunder, right, in the NBA.
Yep.
I saw that somewhere, that meme. Yeah, exactly. So they're the oldest team, so they've got experience. And the big man was Armando Bacot, right?
Yep.
So he's also, I think, in his fourth or fifth year. I feel like he's been there forever. He was on the championship team a few years, or the team that got to the championship against Kansas and then lost. So yeah, I think Carolina in this one. I mean, they're definitely they're definitely capable of laying an egg, in a game here and there too. They've done that a few times this year, but Alabama's they've struggled, I think, throughout the season. They've had moments, where they've really shined, but their defense has really struggled this year. I think Carolina's going to prove just to be too much.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think they were 4-10 in. I think they call it the quad one games. Multiple lopsided losses along the way. Again, they beat Charleston and a 12 seed Grand Canyon. So
Yeah.
right now, Alabama has beaten 2 double-digit seeds. So I mean, the way I look at it is like with Baycott and R.J. Davis. I think Carolina may be too much. I think this is probably going to be the best matchup of this weekend or Thursday and Friday. Iowa State and Illinois. From what I've heard, heavyweight battle between a high-powered offense and a high-powered and lockdown defense. Iowa State, just to give you some stats, forced 17 turnovers, ranked number one on defensive efficiency, and Illinois, the Fighting Illinois, as they call it, are the number one in terms of like offensive efficiency, with putting up 84 points. So something's got to give here, right? So, I watched Iowa State against Washington State, another Pac-12 team. They were good, but they pulled away late in the second half. But what do you think? This is I didn't know where to go with this pick, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, you got the Big Ten champion, conference champion, right? Conference tournament champion versus the Big 12 conference tournament champion. And I remember that Iowa State game. I think they defeated Houston, right, in the conference championship. I'm not sure if it was the final or the semi, but they beat them by like 30 points.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
you're right.
So I mean, like you said, lockdown defense. Illinois is more of an offensive team. Illinois really, I think, had their way with Duquesne in the last round. I forget the exact score differential, but I think they had their way with them. They beat them up pretty good. I'm going to lean slightly towards Illinois, but this game I think is going to, like you said, come down to the final 2 minutes. Hopefully, a classic game, maybe an overtime, but it's going to be a close one.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, you have one of the top offensive teams against the top defensive teams. And when you look at the pattern, the defensive team usually come out on top. And a couple of stats here, the Cyclones have allowed only 80 points twice all season, but Illinois have reached 20 times 80 points this year, which is staggering when you look at the grand scheme of things. But again, one thing that Illinois doesn't have is a point guard, a good traditional point guard. That could be an issue against, like, if you have like a defensive team like Iowa State. That's why I'm kind of leaning towards Iowa State here. Although I do think that since we picked UConn, the matchup for UConn, which would be a problem, would be Illinois. Actually, and that's what I think. That's what I've been hearing even in some of the other podcasts. So. I think Iowa State is what I'm picking with, and looks like you're the same way.
I'm going to go Illinois. Actually, I'm going to go Illinois. Yeah.
Okay. So Illinois. Okay. All right. I think that's a good thing, but I think that's probably one of their toughest matchups for UConn when they meet in the Elite Eight, if both teams win. All right. So another Big East team. I think this is one of the conferences that's been shut out. I mean, right now they're 6-0. I mean, Marquette playing against. I wouldn't call it a Cinderella NC State. NC State, just to give you some stats, they won 5 in a row in the ACC championship. They took down Duke, Virginia, North Carolina along the way, although, Virginia seems to be more of like a team that didn't really show up in the first 4 matchup. Marquette, they got Tyler Kolek back. I mean, he's a player who didn't play in the Big East tournament, and he's a he's a player who's been really solid for Marquette. And, they're playing an NC State, which has DJ Burns, who has been a difference maker low in the post, 24-11 in the last matchup against Oakland. I mean, obviously, NC State lucked out by not playing Kentucky, but guess what? I mean, here they are. I mean, they won 7 games in 12 days. So where do you think it's going on this one?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't know. NC State's they're the hot team right now. They got momentum on their side. The way they rolled through the ACC conference tournament, they got something special, I think, going on over there. They believe in themselves big time right now, and I'm just surprised that their record wasn't a little better throughout there. I'm looking at their record here online. It looks like they're 24-14 now, but so they were 22-14 to start the tournament, and they won about 3 or 4 in a row in the ACC. So if not for winning the ACC tournament, this team obviously would not even be in this position right now. So think about going back a week and a half, they were definitely on the outside looking in. But they've got something special going now with that Burns guy really running the offense through him. He's if you look at him, you wouldn't think he would have a soft touch or anything with the way he shoots around the rim and uses that backboard beautifully with his post up moves. So they're really running the offense well through him. Get the ball to him, and 2 or 3 guys try to trap him, and he kicks it out to one of the guards that opens up an open 3-pointer. They really that's what they did successfully against Oakland. A lot of open looks, running the offense through Burns. So they're rolling in that respect. Marquette, though, like you said, Marquette was a top 5 team, or top 5 to in the top 5 to top 10 all season long, more or less. They struggled a little bit when Kolek went down towards the end of the year, but he's back and he looked great. That was a great game against Colorado. It could have gone either way. Really great game. Colorado has a couple NBA players on that team, future NBA players. So that was a real test in that last round for Marquette, and they persevered. So who am I leaning towards in this game? Man, that's a tough one. Gosh. God, I'm gonna go with I think NC State on this, just because I think they're the hot team right now, and this game's gonna be close. It's gonna be I think a lower scoring game. I think in the high 60s, low 70s, and I think NC State's just gonna pull it out, but barely for some reason.
Yeah, I was when I was looking at this matchup, I think Burns just kind of and they're going to have a tough time. The Golden Eagles are going to have a tough time against. I mean, he's 260 pounds, 6'9", big guy, like you said, kicks it out. And that's one of the things that made the difference against Oakland when he had the chance, he was just, banging it on the boards and then, getting his, 24 points. But then when he was double teamed, he was kicking it out. And then, NC State was able to make the threes. But, to your point, I think, to me, I think, Marquette has too many weapons. Kolek is a great point guard. He's probably one of the best point guards in the league, in the college basketball right now. They got way more scoring options, impact players than Texas Tech and Oakland squads that NC State played. So to me, I'm not going to. I don't want to underestimate NC State by any stretch of imagination, but Marquette probably has too many weapons for NC State defense to handle. So I'm leaning towards Marquette here. I think that's where we go the other way. Okay, then finally we get to this is not finally, but we go to Purdue versus Gonzaga, where Purdue has been such a disappointment in the last few years. Zach Edey definitely has come in, and Purdue just blew out their opponent by 39 points in the second round, which hardly happens.
Yeah.
And interesting thing is, Purdue and Gonzaga actually faced each other this year back in November at the Maui Invitational, and Purdue, went on to win by 10 points, during that time. And again, that's in November. And Zach Edey had, 20. I mean, obviously, 25 and 14, probably one of the best centers in the league right now. And Gonzaga, right? I've always say Gonzaga is one team that never lives up to its potential. They always get to the Elite Eight. But right now, they face a much tougher opponent in Purdue much earlier in the Sweet 16. So where do you think?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting matchup just because, for 2 reasons. Like you said, Purdue, after losing in the first round last year as only the second one seed to ever lose in the first round. They're on a little bit of a mission. They have something to prove, obviously, this year. With this is Edie's last season, and I believe they have a couple other seniors on that team. So that will probably they're angry after what happened last year. So they're on a mission this whole season. Their record 31-4, only 4 losses all season. They play in one of the tougher conferences, the Big Ten, with every single game is a grind, kind of like the Big East. So that's pretty, if you think about it, phenomenal. Only 4 losses all year in a really tough conference. So they're on a mission. And then what's interesting, like you said about Gonzaga, they've always underperformed. Well, I mean, yeah, you could say that, but they've always had such high expectations the last few seasons, as the 1 and 2 seed many years. And I guess the knock on them is just that they have that seed and they're in a conference that just doesn't have the same competition that you get from the ACC or the Big East. So they're not as tested come tournament time. So that's probably been one of the issues. But right now, the focus is off them. They were a 5 seed this year. This team wasn't as good as previous Gonzaga teams. So maybe they have really nothing to lose. They're kind of playing with that mentality probably right now. Nope, the pressure is on Purdue, not on Gonzaga this time. So look at it that way. Gonzaga, they came out really strong in that second half against Kansas. I didn't get too much of a chance to watch it. I had it kind of on the radio as I was driving home from somewhere that day, and they just started really stretching the lead. But I think Purdue is just going to be too tough in this one with Edie and the guard play that Purdue has. They play tough defense as well. I see Purdue moving on in like a 7 or 8 point game in this one.
Yeah, I think I was actually really conflicted because I was looking at some numbers before November. Gonzaga was 6 for 32 from beyond the arc. That's not going to get you done. Now, if there's one could give them a shot against Purdue, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind Edie is a beast, and he's going to be very tough to handle for Gonzaga. I don't think they have the right personnel to match up against Edie. And Purdue can hit 3-pointers. They're very good that way. But Gonzaga, if they can hit their 3-pointers, and it's going to be a handful, I mean, for Purdue to handle. But I think, to me, Edie's been playing with the man in the mission. I mean, they are pretty upset of what happened last year when they lost to Fairleigh Dickinson, and they've actually had a very disappointing last 3 to 4 years. They've always been rated as one of the top teams, and they've not been able to get past that. So I think this is one where I actually watch UConn play Gonzaga, and I also watch Purdue play. I just don't think they have enough answers for Edie. So I'm picking Purdue as well. All right, let's go to Houston and Duke, and this was the one where you had penciled in Houston even before they won against Texas A&M. You almost jinxed them. I think our buddy Andy Wallner was not going to be too happy, but this is a Friday matchup. I mean, what do you think? This is going. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, a podcast wouldn't be complete also without mentioning my friend Jim Nance. Hello, friends. So Jim Nance is, as we know, a Houston alum. I got to go with Houston in this one for the sake of Jim Nance. And I think Duke really surprised me. I thought they were going to go down in the last round to James Madison. I think a lot of people were picking that upset because JMU was a strong team this year, 31-3 from a mid-major, but still 31-3 is you got to be pretty good to only lose 3 times throughout the whole season. And Duke had kind of been up and down. Duke's had some bad losses this year too, and the knock on Duke has kind of been over the years they always live and die by the 3 lately, and the reason why they beat JMU, they were on fire. They were just McCain was, I believe, he was just dropping threes like crazy in that game. Everyone was hot. I don't see that happening again. Houston's going to play some, I think, tenacious defense. They're very, very athletic, tough defense, tough team. They just keep coming at you. I know Houston, the gritty win, they had 3 guys, I think, foul out as overtime began against Texas A&M, and they still, they just kind of grounded out and found a way to survive and advance. So I don't see Duke hitting the high percentage of 3-pointers that they hit against JMU in this one. I don't think they're going to do it 2 times in a row. I see Houston getting this one done and moving on.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. One thing, a couple things here, right? Houston's probably got one of the best defensive. They don't allow opposition to shoot more than 45%. That's usually a recipe for success. And Blue Devils are, one thing I did see a stat there: 6-6 this season in games where they shoot below 45%. So definitely the trend, is goes
Yes.
to Houston. And I think Duke has actually beaten two teams. One is a 13 seed Vermont, and the other one is a 12 seed James Madison. Although James Madison was, won 30 games in a row, 30 games this season in their own conference. But again, it's not in the great conference they play. Like, Houston has the experience of playing very tough games against Iowa State and some of the top echelon teams. So I agree with you. I think even the Texas A&M game. I mean, they had the game in the bag, and they kind of took the pedal of the metal, and then they almost paid for it. They actually had to have a walk on come and make a free throw to even keep them in the game. They had very poor defensive schemes. Kelvin Sampson always coaches a good team, but I don't see Duke beating Houston as well. I mean, I think the upset, there's a chance for Duke to upset, but I think Houston is
Yeah.
moving on.
Yep.
And so, uh, I did see two people pick Houston. I know most of us picked UConn, but I think Houston is definitely one of the top echelon picks. And to your point, Jim Nantz alma mater. So, yep, I
Yep.
guess we go Houston. All right, this is the last one with Tennessee versus Creighton,
Yep.
another Big East team playing against uh, a team in SEC, which has been much of a disappointment. But Tennessee's been the cream of the crop in the SEC. Where do you think this is going here?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with in this one. I'm going to just lean on the way the conferences are performing. We know that the Big East is a tough conference. You and me, we both watch a fair amount of Big East games between with UConn, throughout the season. So we know how tough that conference is and how well those teams are performing. And the SEC has largely been a disappointment. So I think just based on that kind of fact alone, I'm going to have to go with Creighton. I mean, Creighton has three great seniors in Shireman and Kalkbrenner and the transfer point guard from Utah State.
Mhm.
I'm blanking on his last name right now, but he came up big against
Mhm.
Oregon in that double overtime thriller. A bunch of key 3-pointers towards
Mhm.
the end of that game. And so I think that senior leadership's huge from Creighton. The experience of playing in a tough conference like the Big East throughout the season, a lot of tough games. And they were one of the few. They were one of three teams to beat UConn this whole season. So Creighton's
Mhm.
a strong team. Granted it was at home in Creighton, a tough place to play, but they still got the job done against the best team in the country. And Tennessee, they didn't look great, to be honest. They had a nice lead against Texas. They were up, and then they really let Texas climb back in there. And Tennessee shot very poorly. A bad offensive performance, I thought, against Texas in that game from Tennessee. No one really stepped up and really impressed me that much. So I lean towards Creighton in this one.
Okay, yeah. I mean, here's the one I was very conflicted. I think Tennessee. Rick Barnes, who coaches Tennessee, I think packed his old team,
Yeah.
Texas, in the last game, and Dalton Knecht, who's probably one of the top echelon players from Tennessee. Didn't have a great game, but I think he hit some key free throws at the end to win against Texas. But to your point, Creighton has been one of the teams that actually beat UConn at home. They did, beat like number 11 seed Oregon, um, but Creighton's got Kalkbrenner, who's going to be very tough to handle for Tennessee. Both the teams almost didn't make it. They almost had disasters, but um, I was very conflicted on this, but having stayed with the Big East for all year, I'm going to kind of lean towards Creighton to pull off a very close win at the end.
Okay.
So, I think we're both like, we picked Creighton, we picked Houston, we picked
I have NC State. I think you have Marquette,
we
right?
picked Purdue. We picked Purdue. I think you have NC State. I have Marquette. Then Iowa State, Illinois. You picked Illinois. I think I picked Iowa State. And
Correct.
then we both went with North Carolina. We both went with Arizona, and then we both went with UConn.
Correct.
So I think we differ in two. Let's see what happens. It's been chalks. Interesting thing. I think I definitely want to see much closer games. But let's see if this comes to fruition, and we'll be back again to once we have the Elite Eight done. We'll be back again to do as Final Four podcast. So this was fun. I mean, I think it was long, but I think we had to go through 8 games, and I think more than the matchups, I think we also want to win our pool. That's more important. So
That's right.
all right. Thank you, Dan. Thanks again. I know it was late in the night, but thanks for getting on and giving your insights here. Appreciate it.
I'm always happy to. All right. Enjoy the games.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Primo will be back soon.